Thanks everyone for joining today. This is the Manchester Java community, the JVM launch. I'm Nick Ebbett. I help organise the Manchester Java community events. We've got one of the co-organisers on today, who's Andy Dunmore. He might be just kind of lurking in the background, but that's fine. But yeah, so today we've got Jonathan Vila with us. He's going to be sharing his experiences with migrating Spring Boot to Quarkus. So I think, yeah, I'll just hand over to you.
Oh, thank you very much. Well, I will share my screen and start from there.
I suppose it's worth me saying, actually, if anybody has questions throughout this, I think Jonathan's, open to, kind of being interrupted and kind of answering those questions. So if you want to either put them in chat or try and raise your hand and I'll try and spot you, we can kind of work that into the talk.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me, and I'm more than glad to share my experience with the Manchester community. So the presentation that we have today is about migrating a framework to the new kid on the block, Quarkus. And well, for a lot of people, probably this is something that they have, well, in mind since Quarkus appeared. So can I migrate? Do I have to migrate? Is it worth it to do it? So I decided to try myself. So this is my experience, what I'm going to show you. Basically, the contents of the presentation, well, it's listed here. You decide when you want to step out, but the best thing is at the end, as in any movie. So, well, I will explain who am I, and because probably you don't know me, and I want to give you a bit of context about who is talking to you. And also what you can expect of this presentation. What is Quarkus for those of you that do not know much of it? Especially, I'm very interested on answering why I migrated or tried this migration. And obviously I will give you the steps to do the migration. And always remember that you have the repository published on GitHub, and then you can follow there all the commits with the steps done for migrating the application into Quarkus. Then I will give you a performance comparative between the different approaches. It's something that I did very easily, very fast, and very shallow. So simply take it as a first comparative, but nothing to be exhaustive. And I will finish with few references, links, also one app that can help you on migrating from Spring Boot and any other sources. And yeah, documentation that you can find useful if you want to go further on Quarkus. So yeah, this is basically me, the guy in the picture that is being painted by that blonde. I'm also one of the JUG organizers at the Barcelona JUG since 2012. And also co-founder of the JBCNConf is, well, the biggest Java conference in Spain. And we host it every year in Barcelona, obviously. And next year is going to be the 6th edition with around 800 developers, and we expect more, and more than 30 sponsors. So if you don't have any other plan than being in Barcelona, sunny beach, good weather, good food, and techies, then come to the conference. And also I work as a software engineer at Red Hat in the application modernization and migration team. You can find in the left the way to contact me. Please do it. I'm more than glad to answer any question that you have. In my blog, in WordPress, you can find the article about this migration and also other articles about especially test containers. That is something I'm very, very interested on doing testing as if you were in production. And my repositories of my personal things and my Red Hat things are in this GitHub account. Okay, so let's start. What can you expect of this presentation? So it's only my opinion. I'm not going to teach you anything. It's something that works for me, and it's not the way, and I expect not to be. So I expect that you experience yours and find other ways of doing the migration. But this is one of the possibilities that you can follow in order to migrate. And well, here, in order for you to have context about the two different frameworks, the version is 2.2.5 for Spring Boot, and Quarkus is 1.7. Quarkus is a bit farther than 1.7, but this is the version that I used. Okay, for those of you that do not know what is Quarkus, but I expect that every one of you knows which is this game, I will explain a bit. So Quarkus is simply a new, let's say, framework that you can use on Java, Scala, and Kotlin. Basically, Kubernetes native, because it's in its goals is to be in the cloud in a Kubernetes cluster. And it's always like considering that you finally can build your application using GraalVM, so going to native. I will show you the difference between being in the JVM and also being in the GraalVM, and then, well, you can decide if it's worth it for you. And also, it's not redefining any library. So for most of the uses of Quarkus, we are going to use very common and very used standard open source libraries. So we don't need to learn a new language. These are facts about Quarkus, and basically I want to focus on that Quarkus is super fast, is very small in terms of blueprint, so memory especially. It's focused on easy to code, so I said it's not redefining things, so it's you are going to use the same libraries that you were using. And for the new things or the new tweaks, they have invested a lot of time on doing it very easy. It's also open source, obviously. They have fast-paced releases, so every 2 weeks you have a new version, and it's awesome because they introduce new extensions, new improvements, and obviously they fix bugs. And they have tons of extensions. So I'm going to show you that, well, at the moment of creating this presentation, there were more than 90 extensions about libraries that you probably know very well. So it's Kafka, Apache Camel, Keycloak for security, Spring, Vertex, REST Easy Well, you name it. There are several extensions, so it's not like you need to learn another one. It's continue using what you were using, and Quarkus will do the work. A bit of context that also, well, helps me every time that I want to show or explain anything. It's about time and improvement. So it's been 2 years and a bit more, and there has been a lot of versions. So as I said, more or less one version every 2 weeks, and the team behind Quarkus is working a lot, creating new things. So it's new, 2 years, but it has grown a lot in those 2 years. Probably you have seen this chart in several places. Well, my idea with this slide is that you get this into your brain. Quarkus, compared to the traditional cloud native stack, is very, very different. So you can go up to, on JVM, go into half of the megabytes in memory. And if you go to native using GraalVM, well, it's 10 times less. And the time for the first response, it's also a dramatical change. So we are coming from 4.3 seconds to more or less 1 second. But if we go to native, we are going on what? Way less. So it's a dramatical difference. And I want you to take not the numbers, but the idea that it is behind. So you are going to improve footprint and speed only by going to Quarkus on JVM. But if you go one step further, going to native, then it's going to be a super big win. Only to explain that the team that it is behind, well, this is a past screenshot. But well, at that moment, there were 52 authors in Quarkus. In that period, 1 month, 100 closed issues, more than 100 new issues, and 152 pull requests merged. So it's a lot of work, and they continue as they were. So it's the team behind gives companies a big confidence on that there's a lot of work done and a lot of bugs fixed, and also a lot of extensions added every month. So it's enormous that the work that is being done behind. Okay, so let's move to the migration. I hope again that everyone knows which is this game. I've invested a lot of money, so I would like to know that every one of you knows which is this game. So with the migration, the first question that I wanted to answer was why. Okay, you have your application in Spring Boot, it is working fine. Why you need to invest time and money to migrate? Is it worth it in any case? Well, my experience in the past with the Spring has always been like this. It's very easy to develop. You end up with lots of annotations everywhere, but it's easy. But it has long startup times. So when the application starts, it takes a lot to start. Also with tests, they took a lot. It creates a very big application. And there are lots of things happening under the hood. So it's, if you follow the log in Spring Boot, there are lots of services starting, even if you haven't required them to start. So, well, I didn't like that. And I read that Quarkus was easy to develop applications, that it was fast, lightweight, and also GraalVM compatible. That made me think, okay, so for quite a long time, companies have not created lambdas in Amazon using Java, just because it was slow to start. So it took a lot. So for a lambda, well, one of the metrics, one of the most important metrics is that it is fast on starting. So Java was not, let's say, in the league. So people changed to Node.js or Python or other languages that are more that are faster to start. So when I read that the Quarkus had numbers that made it, a choice, if you want to go fast, compatible, so function as a service, then I thought, wow, that's very important. So because my company can just move from having several machines 24/7, having applications on Spring, and probably we can change them to one application and several FAS that will reduce money, or even we can just simply convert several microservices 24/7 to Lambdas. Okay, probably there's a strategy there in order to reduce money invested on public clouds. So then I chose an application from the Spring Boot repositories. It's called the Spring Pet Clinic REST, because I said, okay, if they are publishing this application, it's like a starter for someone that wants to create a REST application, and you want to start from something. Okay, and it is using several technologies that we can try to migrate. So in this case, with the Spring Boot 1, it is using Spring Data, web, security, documentation, actuators, micrometer, CDI, AOP, and catch. Well, seems like a good group of technologies worth to migrate. So in Quarkus, the correspondence is for Spring Data, Panache on Hibernate, JAX-RS for web, Quarkus security for security documentation, OpenAPI, actuators, small right health, micrometer, microprofile metrics, CDI for CDI spec, the standard one, AOP, Mac, no portability on AOP. Spring Catch, we will use Quarkus Catch, that is in fact the library Caffeine. And what did I not migrate? So, well, probably I'm a bit lazy and I didn't want to migrate everything. And this project is coming with 3 flavors of persistence: JPA, Spring Data JPA, and JDBC. So I only migrated JPA just because I think it's the most common one. I wanted to check if everything was working fine, and yeah, that was my decision. So, and also for JMX, it hasn't been migrated, the different parts, just because JMX is not supported by GraalVM directly. So I didn't want to start creating workarounds for this JMX. Okay, everybody is with me? Okay. So now the steps to the migration. For the CDI, it's a matter of changing the interface for the annotation. So instead of autowired, using inject, that is the, let's say, the standard one. And the bin declaration is using application scope. And that's it. It will have auto injection on constructors, and it's going to be lazy by default. That it's also very important if we want to save time on starting. So what did I find okay, and what did I find issues with it? Well, it's okay for, it's a straightforward migration for bins. I didn't miss any feature. And in the contrary, there's no annotation built in for inject or decide which is the implementation of a bin, depending on the profile that you are passing on the command line. You know that with the Spring, you can pass the profile on the command line, and then you can annotate a bin that will be used on a specific profile. We don't have that with, or we didn't have that with Quarkus, or at least I didn't know the way to do it. but you can do it manually. It's very easy. Just simply with a config property, you are doing the implementation in a, let's say, in a configuration class, and you can decide which is the implementation depending on the value on that property. It's not the same, but you can have the same result. And you cannot have private members on injection, so everything has to be packaged at least. With JPA repositories, well, it's using Hibernate Panache repository. And in my case, I went down to Panache repository base just because in the Spring project, it was using an integer for the identity class, for the ID class, sorry. But Panache repository is by default using long. So I didn't want to change anything. So just simply go into Panache repository base and define that it is an integer, that's it. And yeah, using this implementation of this repository, Quarkus will create all the methods for you in order to get, well, the common things that you are going to do with an entity: list, find, persist, delete, and you name it. So it's very, very easy. So it was very straightforward migration. One thing is that we don't have the query DSL method. So those methods called find by name and age lower than 40, we don't have that. So we can just annotate a method with the query to be injected, but we don't have that feature from Spring. I would say that I'm not a fan of that feature, because when you do complex queries, it becomes harder to understand or harder to do it with the Spring notation. But well, it's a personal thought. Regarding Spring REST, well, it's about moving from the REST interfaces to the JAX-RS ones. So it's more or less a one-to-one mapping, except for request mapping. If you use request mapping with Spring, well, in that annotation, you can pass the verb, you can pass the params, and the endpoint. But we don't have that with JAX-RS, as far as I know. And then I did have to break down that annotation. So using path, get, post, put, delete, and path param. But well, it's more a string replace than any other thing. And nothing to mention here. Everything was easy and straightforward. With security, we are going to move to Quarkus security. And we are going to change from the pre-authorized annotation to roles allowed annotation. More or less, you have the same behavior, but not exactly. At the moment of the migration, you can have an expression language in the pre-authorized in Spring. So saying, well, in this case, is a Boolean has role, and you specify which is the role. In the Quarkus security, it was a list, and you needed to add all the possible values to that list. So it's not the same, but more or less you can have a similar result. Also, the security was implemented using DB persistence, so it was everything persisted on the database. And in this case, it's a matter of adding the Elytron security JDBC extension and configure it on the properties file. So it's very easy. You can see here that you can configure which is the SQL to retrieve the user from username and password. And well, more or less you are configuring the security with the properties, and that's it. Everything was transparent for me in that case. So as I said, everything was very fine. but we don't have expression language for the role validation. With the cross origin, it's very easy. So it's simply adding those two properties in the properties file, and that's it. Nothing else. But I didn't find a way to do this per controller. So in the Spring version, you can configure the cores per controller, but in the Quarkus, I didn't find a way to do it per controller, and I did it globally on the properties. That's it. I don't really see a point of having different configurations for cores, but it was not a problem in this project. With metrics, well, it's a matter of adding the small right metrics extension and annotate all the custom methods that you want to have for the custom metrics. So, well, if you don't want to have custom metrics, that's it. You will have the by default metrics. You have it on the left. But if you want to have custom metrics, well, one way is to annotate all of the methods that you want to have metrics on with counted and timed. And then you will have the custom metrics also in the output. But the main difference with the Spring project is that it is using AOP, and you have superpowers when you use AOP. So it was very easy to have metrics for lots of methods only with one expression. Because you can just simply say, okay, I'm going to execute this method in a round of each method that belongs to this package. And that's it. So, and this was the case, and we don't have that with Quarkus. So you need to annotate every method that you want to have custom metrics. There are other ways. You can do it also with the Spring dependency, but there's also one other thing that I will explain a bit later. So with validation, it's a matter of moving from a Spring validation to Hibernate validator, and it's a matter of changing a bit the way it is done in the method, but not a lot. So it's changing the response, the output type, and not a lot of things. And that's it. So it's a matter of, as I said, changing from the controller advice class to an implementation of the exception mapper. And that's it. For the rest, you are going to use the valid annotation and the validation annotations on the POJOs to provide the constraints. Nothing to mention here. For the Swagger, well, it's a matter of adding the extension of OpenAPI, and then you will have all your resources in the documentation. But you also want to have like this global information. It's a matter of extending application and then adding this OpenAPI definition annotation with the different elements, and that would give the Swagger documentation more context, no, in the header. It's easy. It's as you said, as you saw, it's very easy. It doesn't involve a lot of work. And also we have Swagger UI out of the box in the test profile, but you can activate it also in the production profile. The only thing that I didn't know the way to do it is that for the Spring, you can specify which are the paths that you want to scan to include the documentation in the Swagger. So you could decide that you want 3 endpoints not being published on the Swagger documentation. I didn't know how to do it on Quarkus. It's more a global configuration. I didn't know how to do it, to be honest. As I said before, for metrics, it was using AOP, and then we needed to use, as I said, annotations for each method. As you can see in the left, it's very easy with AOP. It's just simply annotating with aspect, a class, and then creating an around annotation specifying which is the scope, and this will be invoked for all of the classes, methods, whatever it is specified in the expression. So yeah, with one line you can do a piece of code to be executable lots of times. But in this case, this was used for having metrics for the database usage, and we have that with this property in the properties. So if we activate the Hibernate ORM metrics, then we will have all the metrics of Hibernate in the metrics output, as you can see on the right. So we can reduce all the boilerplate code that we had with AOP in this specific project with one line. Well, this has been said several times before. No expression language to define methods affected, and you need to annotate all the methods. But in this specific case, with only one property, it affected all what we needed. With local caching, well, it's a matter of having catch result and specify which is the catch name, and that's it. Then you can configure it on the properties file, and you will have it. It's very easy. There's a difference on the class being used, but in the end, it's similar behavior, and it's very easy to transform one into the other. Nothing to say here. About testing, it's for MVC. Well, it's about moving from mock MVC to rest assured. It's changing the expressions of the test, but I have to say that for me it's more clear the rest assured way than the other one. But well, it's a personal thought. And yeah, it was a matter of just simply changing the expression, and also considering that the expressions on the expectations can change, just because rest assured comes by default with gpath expressions, and with the Spring we were using JSON path, but well, in the end they are very similar, so no big deal here. With test resources, well, in this case, the test was done using an H2 database in memory. So what we need is that every time that a test starts, we need that H2 database to be started. To get that, it's simply adding this Quarkus test resource annotation, specifying which is the class, and that's it. Quarkus will take care of it, and the test will start an H2 database before starting the class. The test, sorry. And about mocking, well, it's very easy. It's simply adding the Quarkus JUnit 5 Mockito extension, and then you do the inject mock. And that's it. You just simply go on using that inject mock. Okay, so we've reached the second part of the presentation, and I want to say, forget everything that I said. That was a lot of work and changing from one technology to another, so that's fine, but you need to change those technologies. So let's go for something more powerful, okay? So using the Spring extensions for Quarkus, just simply use a Spring Web extension and do not touch your controllers. If you're not using any corner case not covered by the extension, go on, do not touch anything. Just simply add the extension and Quarkus will do the work. Nothing to change here. A Spring dependency injection, the same. If you're not using a corner case not supported, just simply don't touch anything. Just simply add the extension and Quarkus will build the needed code. The same for a Spring Data JPA, where there are some things that are not covered by the extension, but if you are not using them, do not touch your repositories, do not touch anything that you are using with the Spring Data JPA. It will be transformed into what Quarkus needs, and that's it. Nothing to change, and simply go on. The same with the Spring Security. And in this case, we have expressions for roles validation. So nothing to change in your security. Use the security extension and go for it. So when we reach that point, this point, okay, I'm going to show a performance matrix to show, well, what's the difference between using the Spring Boot, Quarkus in JVM, and Quarkus on GraalVM. Well, I have to say that I was expecting that Quarkus would create a lighter Uber jar, but it's not the case. It's more or less the similar. It takes 3 times the time to build it. But obviously, Quarkus GraalVM, it takes even longer, just because everything has to be done in compile time. So the application is double the other, and it takes, well, way longer on building. But on the part that we are most interested on, that it is boot time and boot footprint, it's when we reach this difference. So Spring Boot takes around 7 seconds starting, and it consumes around more than 600 megabytes. With Quarkus, it's around 3 times less, so it's 2.5 seconds to start, and it consumes only 250 megabytes. But the most important point that I think to say here is that you have the opportunity to go native, so use it. So you can just convert this application that you are running on JVM into a native one. Simply go and convert it, and these are the numbers. So we are going from around 7 seconds to less than half a second. And we are
Okay.
something happened.
Yeah. Oh, we got you back. We've got you back.
Okay.
Yeah, it cut off for a moment.
Okay. It was only a matter of few seconds, or?
Yeah, probably about 30 seconds. I think we lost you for.
Oh, so
I think you were,
the
yeah, you were just on that comparison slide still, just talking about going native.
Okay, so let's go back to the. Yep. Okay.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay. So, well, what I was saying is that with these numbers, well, you can think on trying to move things to foss, and obviously to have microservices starting and stopping faster, obviously starting with these numbers. And also you are moving from different memory footprint, so you can just simply select a different machine on AWS in order to pay less to Amazon or others. Okay, so regarding references, I'm going to show you, well, different things that you can just simply check because they are providing a lot of value. So, well, the original Spring Pet Clinic REST repository, the one with the migration, also, well, the web page for Quarkus.io and the Twitter handle, and the page on developersredhat.com, where you will find several trainings on Quarkus and documentation. If you have questions or need help, then the Quarkus Dev mailing list is a good place to start. About those tutorials that I mentioned in Developers Red Hat, well, I totally encourage you to go there and check, because it's a way of testing Quarkus on different topics without messing with your local machine. Everything is done on the cloud, and well, it's very easy to follow. So I totally encourage you to check it. The cheat sheet with all the changes that are published every time that a new release appears. My colleague Alex is publishing this documentation, and it's totally valuable to check this, because it summarizes all the changes. The place to start coding, code quarkus.io, and well, you will select the different libraries, and it will create a zip file for you to start on coding for Quarkus. And now I would like also to show MTA. So it's a migration toolkit for applications. It's an open source tool that you can find in GitHub, and it focuses is to help developers in order to migrate from A to B. So there are different migration paths covering, I don't know, from Camel 2 to Camel 3, to Monolith to Cloud, from WebSphere to EAP, and from Spring Boot to Quarkus. It will check your code, and it will show you which are the incidents or the things that you need to change. These are the different screens. So you have a dashboard with all the incidents grouped by category, and for you to have an image of the migration. It also has the story points, where you can see also the order of magnitude to do this migration. It will show you the issues in your code, and it will show you the files. And if you click on each file, you will see the changes that you need to apply in each line where it finds an issue. It also gives you a brief summary of your application and the technologies used. And there is also one plugin for Eclipse and VS Code, if you want to analyze directly your source code. These are a few real use cases of migration, and I especially focus on the Vodafone one, where they migrated the Spring Boot with Quarkus microservices. And well, they provide a lot of feedback on this and numbers on savings. And finally, I would like to recommend 6 books that have nothing to do with technology, just because I think developers not only consume technology. So if you want to read novels, I can recommend The Sea Cathedral and The Last Caton. If you like Da Vinci's Code, this last Katon, for me, it's way better. If you want to know why you think, Drive is a very good book for motivation. So explains how we motivate, or if external people can motivate us or not. And Thinking Fast and Slow, it covers the two different brains, so the rational and the irrational, and probably stating that we are less rational than we think we are. And then for sci-fi, two books that treat simulated reality. The Futurological Congress is a funny one, short and very nice, and Ubik is like a totem on this. So it's an awesome book that I totally recommend. And that's it. This has been the presentation. I still hope that everyone knows which is this game. And thank you for being there. And if you need help or have questions, just please ping me on my different connection handlers here at Twitter, email, or my blog on my GitHub, and I will be more than glad to answer. So if there are questions, I will be more than happy to answer them.
Cool. Thank you very much, Jonathan. Yeah, there is a question actually. So, do you know if Spring Webflux works the same as Spring REST? I suppose that's in relation to migrating a Webflux-based Spring app.
Well, I have to say that we recently developed one rule for this MTA application to cover Spring Webflow. I have to say that I didn't do it. It was my colleague. So I'm not very aware of it. But I think it's more related with MVC, but not REST. So I'm not sure. I can check. I can check and give an answer, but I'm not sure.
Okay, that's fine. I've actually got a question that came into my mind when you were. So I was it's interesting you brought in the Spring kind of compatibility at the end, because I was wondering that all the way through. But then that kind of answered that. But then a follow-up question to that would be, if you were migrating a Spring app, then would you create a new Quarkus application to give yourself a baseline kind of framework and then copy files in? Or can you do it like take the Spring app in place and change its dependencies in your POM or your Gradle file? Is there a kind of an easier route to do that migration?
Well, in my case, what I did with this migration was to use the repository, so the code on Spring Boot,
yeah,
and then start creating small steps of migration,
yeah,
for each bit, not moving everything. It could be another approach. So I don't know exactly the benefit or not. Well, the thing is that if you move everything, it won't compile until everything has migrated. And even you will not have like hints on your IDE probably, because you need to add all the extensions and so on.
Yeah, so I suppose you might be in a broken state for quite a while you're fixing all the issues, which might not be much fun.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's interesting. Makes sense. Are there any other questions from anybody on the call?
Yeah, I've got a question.
Cool.
Your colleague Roberto Cortez, also from Red Hat, he did a presentation for the LJC. You included some of the metrics for Graal in terms of memory, but you didn't include anything to do with networking. So in his presentation, he listed that running on Graal, connections were about 50% down and latency was about 10 milliseconds down. So I don't know if that was something that was actively worked on, or if that was more an issue on the GraalVM side.
I have to say that I cannot answer that. So I'm not sure if it's something that it is related to GraalVM per se, Quarkus with GraalVM, So I'm not sure. But it's interesting your question. I will check that. And
Yeah, because I know you're making savings on less RAM, but you're still going to end up spending because you can't have the same number of
yeah,
connections per VM. So your compute cost per CPU is still probably going to stay the same. So I don't know if that was something that was a known issue that was getting worked on, or because there seems to be a lot of interest in Quarkus.
Okay, I'm not aware, but I will check. Thank you.
Yeah, cool. Anybody else with anything? All right, Craig's just shared a link in the chat, I think, probably to Roberto's
Okay.
talks.
Yeah, I will check with him.
Yeah. Cool. Well, yeah, I mean, that probably kind of covers it then. So thank you very much, Jonathan. It's really appreciate you joining us. Hopefully everybody's kind of enjoyed it and learned a few things. I definitely have. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, as I said, if you have more questions like these interesting ones that I couldn't answer, sorry, I will be more than glad just to check them and investigate and give an answer. So please reach me on Twitter or on my email, and I will try to provide an answer. Yeah,
cool. If you're able to maybe share your slides, I can share them out with the community and stuff, and everybody can kind of look back at those.
Yes.
Excellent. Right, well, thanks, Jonathan. Thanks, everybody, for joining, and see you all again soon.
Okay.
Thank you.
See you.
Cheers. Bye.